There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So go ahead. Sorry about that, Christine.
No worries. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to I cannot share my PowerPoint. That is A-okay.
Let me unshare my screen and you can share your screen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Can you guys see it okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So yes, my name is Christine Hicks. I am a licensed WISE care coordinator for Palouse River Counseling in Washington. And like I shared earlier before we unfortunately got cut off, I have Leslie Cornejo with me. She's my certified WISE peer support counselor, and I'm hoping she'll take some time to explain her role within the modality of WISE and what she does. So we'll get going. Okay, so for those of you that are maybe not familiar with WISE, it's actually a cute little acronym for Wraparound with Intensive Services. So it's a research-based model or approach to helping families that may have significant behavioral or mental health needs. And it's a community-based program. And so what that means is that we actually will go out into the community, whether it's within the town or out in the rural community, and we'll provide services out there. So typically we'll be running in and out of our offices pretty quickly because we're constantly on the move, going to serve clients out in the community. We utilize a team-based approach. So really a lot of the groundwork and core of our work is within a team. So that includes the therapist, other system care providers, doctors, school officials, anybody that's really an integral part of the family will include. And kind of the caveat to WISE is that it's a Medicaid only program. So we really only serve clients that are contracted with the 4 MCOs. So if you want more information about WISE, if you're not really familiar or you're a little bit interested about the program, I have a little link down at the bottom, or you can just search WISE HCA and it will bring you right to that first link on what WISE is and basically what the different components are for it. Okay. So the use of peer supports in WISE at PRC. So with Palouse River Counseling, our agency doesn't employ actual peer supports that work in like the other departments. We only have peer supports that are within our WISE program. So we've been using peer services since WISE's early inception a long time ago, which WISE came out of a lawsuit generated in Washington State. And really, this is the only program at the agency that we use peer supports as a part of our service delivery and our service implementation. We are trying to work towards expanding our peer supports to more of our other departments that we have. So our adult mental health, our youth mental health, and even our SUD services. So we're hoping to try and expand that instead of it being strictly to WISE, but more expanding that into other sectors of our agency. And like I mentioned earlier, Leslie Cornejo is our certified WISE peer support, and Angela Acosta is our certified parent support. She was unfortunately could not come to this meeting and do her little presentation, but she also serves as the parent peer support for our agency and for our program. So how long has our organization been using peer supports? We've been using peer supports for over 5 years once we got the approval and once we became a WISE certified agency. We've been utilizing really that lived experience, which is the core of the peer support, to really engage with our clients and provide that rapid rapport building, which we know has been extremely successful with our peer supports. And also our peer supports is kind of a little unique niche, as we provide services also during times of crises. So Leslie will be available for clients who are in crisis that need that additional peer support help. She has been known to go out to the homes and provide the support as well as a part of WISE and that modality of peer services. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're expanding our peer support treatment model into other areas of our agency. So with that, I will hand it over to Leslie Cornejo, who's our certified WISE peer support. Go ahead, Leslie.
Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, hi, like Chrissy said, I'm Leslie. I'm the certified peer support for WISE here in Whitman County. And I've been here for almost 3 years. I think it'll be 3 years by December this year. And like she said, I utilize a lot of my own lived experience because I experienced a lot of my own trauma growing up and dealt with a lot of not just like experiencing it myself, but also witnessing it happen to either other friends or family. And usually I was kind of right there. So I think it really helps with the kiddos who I meet, because obviously they tend to have a lot of their own trauma that's pretty extensive too. So we can relate in that way to let them know that, I understand where you're at the moment, and I know more or less like what you've been through, depending, because there's a lot of stuff, and using that to show them like, hey, I know it could be really hard. I've been really depressed before, and you know what? But there's a kind of like a light at the end of the road. Like, you're going to be okay. You're going to make it, because I made it here. Because I'm still also in my own recovery. I see a therapist too as I keep going. I take medication, and I try to, make sure that I'm okay before I meet with the kiddos, especially if I have a bad day. That way, I can help them out. Or I sometimes use like my own experiences as day to day, because, life tends to come up, and sometimes I'll say, you know what, I've had a bad day today, but that's okay. Sometimes we got to keep going with our bad days. So it's been really rewarding for me too, as much as I like to teach them, and hopefully I've taught them a lot, I hope. I think I get to learn a lot from them too. But yeah, that's a lot of what I do. It's just being there for them, being able to advocate for them when they need me to, whether if they have a hard time speaking for themselves, or maybe they're a little shy, or whatever it may be. Even not just within our WISE team meetings, but whether it's like, hey, I need help at school, I need help. Maybe I'm scared to talk to the doctor, to a lawyer, and I'm like, you know what? I would be scared too. Let me help you out. So sometimes we get to experience new things together, which is fun, because I tell them, you know what? I'm nervous too. So it's been really fun. I think it's been very helpful for them too, especially to have somebody who understands. And I can honestly say it's a program I wish I had when I was their age. So I think it would have helped me tremendously. And it seems to be helping them as well. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm not sure what else, Chrissy, you want me to say.
No, that was a gorgeous review. So thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Christine. As far as the WISE program at Palouse River Counseling, how long have you guys had that program for?
Oh gosh, I believe it's been since 2014 or 15 since we've had it. Like right when it became a certified program after the lawsuit is when we became a WISE certified agency.
Nice.
So yeah.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Please feel free to ask. If not, I still have a couple for you guys, Christina and Leslie. If nobody else is wanting to ask questions, you guys can either ask them, raise your hand, or type your questions into the chat box. As far as you, Leslie, you're the peer support counselor there. What have been some of kind of your like a story that stands out as saying, hey, this individual really overcame their challenges and barriers because of the one, the peer support, and also by being part of the WISE program? Do you have anything that you can share with us, or even you, Christine, if you have any stories like that?
Yeah, I think it might have been I think maybe the first kid I actually met when I first started this job. This kiddo, he was really struggling and really sure that, this was all life was going to be, that, that there was no upside, that there was nothing better than what he had in the moment, because he had a lot of obstacles. He, his dad had issues with alcoholism and previous abuse allegations. And so this kid was all out of sorts, a very angry kid who would be really willing to fight, and honestly, for me, I was a little worried about how I'd fit and help him out. But as we got to know each other, as we got to talk, and I get to share my experiences about how, my own family dealt with physical abuse, and how I personally dealt with it, because I had shared with them I had older siblings who had decided to fight or decided to use drugs in order to cope with what was going on at home. And I got to tell them, well, here's how it turned out for them. Not great. But for me, who chose not to fight and who chose to kind of focus on getting better, or, after I started working on my mental health, and now that I'm in a happier place, I'm a happier person. It took a little bit for him, to grasp, which is completely fair. But I think after a little while, he started to really get it and started to really understand, okay, this is not my life forever. I'm going to be able to get past this. And of course, there's always going to be bumps in the road, but he definitely has a better standing now ever since he exited the program. Yeah, he's someone I can't ever forget because I was worried about him, but now I think he's doing a lot better.
Good, good. Thank you. Do you want to share yours, Christine?
Oh man, I mean, there's just so many that have left impressions on us. Really, you know, we had a kiddo who had a lot of significant complex trauma growing up, childhood trauma. And like Leslie kind of alluded to, allowing them and teaching them that it's not all doom and gloom, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel has been very rewarding to see, because we see the progress that they make. We see the steps that they take to get to where they're at, and them accomplishing their goals consistently, developing the self-awareness, being able to maybe stop before they act. You know, we've had a couple kiddos who've had significant anger issues where we've sat down with them and Leslie has shared her story with them, and that leaves a mark on them. And then not only that, but then the intensive work and services that we provide. We got one kiddo into anger management classes that helped them out a lot. And then with Leslie working with them one-on-one really closely and sharing her story, we saw the change happen over time. And then when we exited this kiddo out, they were just so thankful. They were like, this was the best program ever. Thank you so much for your guys' time and energy. And I don't think I would still be alive if it wasn't for you guys. So hearing those words from these clients that are significantly younger than we are, that have been through probably so much that most adults have been through, just to hear that and just kind of the weight lifted off their shoulders is extremely rewarding. It makes this job so fulfilling. So, I mean, there's just so many success stories that we've had throughout this program that it's hard to pick and choose which one.
Yeah. And then as far as parent involvement, you know, in the WISE program, you, Leslie, you know, being the peer support, what's your involvement with the parents, you know, as you're going through the WISE program?
So I usually do keep in contact with the parents, obviously not as much as the parent support, but I do update them every once in a while and, you know, hey, we're doing all right, things should be okay. Or sometimes I'll ask questions if they're having a bad day or if they just seem off and maybe they didn't want to say anything. But I always keep in contact with them, first of all, to keep up with scheduling, and then also like ask like, hey, is there anything I need to know that happened over the weekend, during the week, or just something that I may not be aware of that they want me to keep in mind. And they're pretty good usually about letting me know like, hey, this happened today at school or this happened at home. So it's a pretty good consistent contact, which is really nice. And sometimes I'll offer in my own input because sometimes they'll ask me, I don't understand why my child's doing A, B, and C, or I don't understand why my child's doing this. And sometimes if they're asking me that, I'll let them know like, hey, it could be because of this, or they're actually struggling with this instead, you know, and that's why they're doing this, and helping them understand, like, you know, remember, they're kind of younger, they're not an adult. So they don't have the experiences or maybe the skills quite yet to understand why they shouldn't be doing this or that. So I do keep in good contact with most of them, I think.
Okay, good. I do have a question in the chat box for you guys. Says, regarding assisting the DCRs, have you peer supports attended any special trainings to be prepared for supporting those in crisis? If so, are there trainings you could recommend for others in peer support roles? So this is more of a general question, not just for you guys, but you guys have some input into that question.
Yeah, so I actually will be addressing this kind of later on in the presentation, but in terms of training, I know Leslie and I have done some training around crises, so working with youth in moments of crisis and how we can be the most effective, especially when we have a client that's dysregulated. We have not taken any formal DC trainings because that requires a lot more intensive training, but we have taken the basic trainings behind how do we engage with a client who's in crisis? What are some modalities that we can use? What are, you know, the most comforting, effective language that we can use, and not use language that could potentially be triggering or escalate a client that's in crisis. I know that's just a couple of the things that we've done, but in terms of like extreme formal training, we have not taken any of that right now. Leslie, do you want to jump in and add anything that you can think?
Yeah. So like Chrissy said, I don't think we've done anything too extreme, although we did just do I think it was either last week or the week before that we did attend a trauma crisis training. I don't remember exactly, but usually we get through those from like, you know, I think like one being Boost Collaborative, the Copeland Center. I think there's another one. What is it called? I can see the image in my mind, but I forget what the other one is, but there's quite a few that we get either through emails or sometimes we get them forwarded from especially from our supervisor or other therapists within the agency say, hey, this seems like a good training, let's do this, or if you want to, you know. I'm not sure, Chrissy, if you remember the other ones that, other training ones, the program.
I know that we get it through the Wise Bridge training. Lutheran, we've gotten it through Lutheran services down in the Tri-Cities area. I know there's a few other agencies that have provided trainings. I know the LC Valley did like a trauma-informed training that involved DCR work and crisis. So definitely kind of a wide variety of trainings that we've done, but like the official Washington State, like DCR training, we are not trained in.
Yeah.
He did say that sounds great. I know WISE is also very trauma-informed and strength-based, and he said thank you. In the past, Greater Columbia has also offered trauma-informed care a training, and so that's, you know, kind of not necessarily, you know, training for a person in crisis, but it's kind of teaching you how to approach individuals that, you know, you're not triggering them, that you're taking into consideration, you know, what they have been through, and really offering, you know, care that's appropriate for that specific person. I believe that in our website, gcach.org, the recording under the resources in learning collaboratives, I believe it should be in there, the trauma-informed care. If anybody's interested, you know, you guys can look in there as well. Very, very informative, very, very good information provided in there. So just putting that out there for you guys. Any other questions for Christine or Leslie before we move on to the next presenter? Okay, sounds like there is not. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Leslie and Christine.
All right. Shall I stop my screen?
Yes, I think yep, there you go. Okay, so next, we'll do a small 10-minute break. It is 2:18, so at 2:28, we'll be back. Run to the bathroom, get a drink of water, and we'll be back in 10 minutes for our next presenter. All right, everybody. So it is 10 minutes. Next, we have one of our board members, Ronni Batchelor. She has been a certified peer counselor for a couple of years now. And she has been doing peer support work for many, many years, even before it was a thing here in Washington State. So Ronni, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Martine. My name is Ronni Batchelor. I am a board member representing the consumer sector with GCACH. And Martine has asked me to come and kind of share my story and how I became a certified peer counselor and a CHW. So when I was in 5th grade, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and I didn't realize what that meant. Psychiatrists and psychologists don't want to see you. I had no therapy, and I just basically tripped and flipped through life. I ran away from home when I was 14, joined Ringling Brothers Barn Bailey Circus, and that's when things took a drastic turn left. So I found myself getting into fights, getting into trouble, arrested. And it wasn't until I was 19 that I found a therapist who could actually explain what that meant and reaffirmed that, yes, I was diagnosed correctly. We worked on me one thing at a time. So anger was my first go-to, violence was my second. And that's not what I wanted to be known for. So we did some extensive therapy sessions, and I became married, and I had a son, a daughter, and another son. And through a divorce, I found myself again in trouble. I was working, I fell off of a ladder at work, and I hurt my back severely, unable to care for my youngest son. He went to his father, and later in his life, he was diagnosed with bipolar, with psychotic episodes. So going through that as a parent and also understanding what my diagnosis was and trying to work with him, trying to get him into program after program, it didn't happen for me. There was no WISE at the time. I really believe that WISE could have and would have helped him. But at the age of 19, he took his life. My daughter was pregnant at the time, and during her pregnancy, the baby became was experiencing trauma, umbilical cord around the neck and leg, and we lost Cora 2 months after her birth. Then a year later, my oldest son talked to me, and he thought that he had a trying to think of what a hernia. And it turned out that the testicular cancer that he had metastasized, and there was a tumor, jellyfish type, in his stomach and one in his leg, in his femur. And so trying to save his life was unsuccessful. And that took me into a tailspin when we lost him. Trying to maintain my emotional stability was difficult all the way through this. But I just had to come to terms with what has happened and how I could put my feet on the floor and have a purpose for the day. And that took me back to my roots of community involvement. And community involvement to me has really saved my life. I was, at the time, on medications for pain, chronic pain, and I was taking Oxycontin, and I became addicted to Oxycontin. Um, I went to my therapist. I talked to my therapist about getting off of that medication and getting me on an antidepressant, and then moving forward to a pain clinic. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything that could help. So I took it upon myself to withdraw from the pain medication and try really hard to manage my pain instead of not managing it and it getting excessively worse. So getting into my community and connecting with people has always been my absolute joy. And so I started outreach into my Latino community. I help people that were not here in the United States by legal standards, find the care that they needed in our community. And I helped pregnant women get into services, typically for free because there wasn't a clinic for them to go to. And I had a doctor that was willing to see the women that I was supporting. From there, there were a lot of different aspects to um, that community that were very disheartening to me. I believe that when somebody's in crisis, that they need to be supported more than ever. So that led me to a woman that I helped with her son. He came here with them as an early arrival. Um, he had a hole in the bottom chamber of his heart that was undiagnosed, and he was having some symptoms of bluing around the mouth, the nails, toes. And so got him to the emergency room and found out that there was a hole in the bottom of the chamber of his heart. They were going to ship him off to Savannah, Georgia at the time, because I was living in Georgia at that time. And I had requested that they send him down to Wolfson's Children's Hospital, because there was a doctor down there that headed up the pediatric cardiology department. This was my first introduction to serious health needs. This doctor was able to serve that family and was able to go in 14 months after the doctor first saw him. We had to keep him healthy. He was given 3 weeks to live. And until he was healthy enough to go through the surgery, we had to keep him. We had to keep him without any kind of infections, colds, or anything like that. So that was an introduction to a CHW role. After that, I had moved when my youngest son died, and I had left Georgia and I came here to Washington, where I lived as a youth, and I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I looked for another therapist that I could talk with, be with, and kind of help coach me through my next steps forward. Upon that, I was diagnosed with a tumor in my liver, and it took me 4 doctors in order to figure out what was going on and what the truth was. And this tumor was a pre-malignant tumor, and I ended up having the tumor removed from my liver by a doctor up at Seattle University Hospital. At that point, I had already been settling here into the Tri-Cities area and doing outreach to homelessness. I didn't realize the severity of my own health would also push me further with a CHW role. So in 2014, I believe it was, I became a CHW. And doing outreach in this community helped me stay connected and kept me well in my mental health. So my first person that I was helping was a woman who was out on the street, SUD, co-occurring mental health. And I thought for sure she was going to die on the street. I was able to get her into housing, and I was able to get her into mental health services, and I was also able to help her realize her own worth. She entered into housing and she struggles daily with her health and with her mental health. But I always get calls from her that says, "Thank you for finding me on the street and helping me survive." Um, in 2016, when I went to work with Lutheran Community Services, I became a peer support. That was my introduction to strength-based care. And I worked with parents with children that had some of the same experiences that I had already gone through with my own children, and losing a child to suicide and having these women going through the same fears that I did. I was able to help support them in a way that I don't think I would have ever been able to help them without that training. As peer supports, we give or we share, disclose our stories. And those stories are imperative because when we've already been through something and we're helping someone get through theirs, it's an empowering feeling to see someone grow in their own and take control more of their emotions and be able to understand what's happening around them. It's really nice to have the support of teams, and those teams are imperative because everyone does something different, but it's the support around that really is bar none. So WISE programs, I can't say enough about. But everyone here has shared some of that information, and they are spot on. I meet people where they're at, not out in the community, not for coffee and stuff like that. I meet them where they are emotionally. I don't expect them to do what I want them to do. I believe that they have a plan, they just don't know how to implement that plan. And so the WISE team is able to come up with that plan with them, support them, and help them through the process. And I tell everyone that I did outreach with on the street, I do what I can when I can, but you have to do the work. And that involves really understanding where they are and how they function in that place, and what strengths can I pull from them to help push them up and over, instead of telling them, you know, you're just not going to make it, or toughen up, or, everybody goes through that. They're not everybody, they're individuals. And that's where peer support starts, is seeing the person as they are and as the way they come, not expecting them to act or react and respond in ways that we would expect them to. I had a gentleman that was out on the street for 10 years, and he was fully in his symptoms of schizophrenia. And this was when I was working with crisis response unit for Lourdes. And I had seen this gentleman out on the street since I got here to Tri-Cities, and he would never come near me. But I always had a pair of socks, winter socks. I found a sleeping bag for him at one time, and I just wanted to help, and he wasn't ready to have anybody help him. because he was so paranoid about everybody and everything. But when I showed up on the team of outreach, it was an amazing transformation to watch him go from symptomatic to being into an inpatient situation and coming out with more clarity and insight to his own health and his own mental health. And being able to support him through his housing needs, getting different organizations involved during that time, because he wasn't going to be getting an apartment anytime soon if he didn't have advocacy. Had to advocate for his Medicaid. I had to advocate and help him get through systems that were very daunting, including Social Security, including housing voucher through CAC, including many other important community organizations that we needed to get through the door. This gentleman finally got housing. He will never be without housing because he got a permanent housing voucher. And he has got long-term case management, so he doesn't fall through the cracks any longer. Those pillars of support are so important in the community that I can't say enough about. When we work with people who are in crisis or who are going through an emotional impossibility, we as peers find the possibilities. And watching someone become self-advocating and self-empowered is a true emotional experience, as well as just an elated feeling of accomplishment for that person. And it's not so much what I did, it's so much what they did in their recovery or in their mental health state. When you can see the transformation and you get to be a part of that, it's such a privilege. And each person that you meet, you can't compare them to the person before or the person after. I had a gentleman that was suicidal, and this was while I was doing boots on the ground outreach work. I didn't have an agency behind me. When he told me that all he wanted to do was die, my heart sank, because he didn't have much to look forward to, because he was in 4th stage colon cancer, and they didn't, they meaning the doctors, didn't expect that he would live through the surgery that he had to undergo. When the Affordable Care Act came in, I became an in-person assister. And this gentleman that was experiencing all of these horrific hurdles in front of him, and all he wanted to do was die, that peer support, he had been an alcoholic all his life. We were able to get him services to support him through everything that he needed. He lived through the surgery, and he was reunited with his family. My job was to help him find the quality of life, not the quantity. And so when I was working with him, I was able to get him in-home care services. We were able to build him a ramp for his motorized scooter to go up. I found him housing with another elder gentleman, and they got along really well. He was on the street most of his life at 13, he said that he was no longer living at home, and he became an alcoholic at 19. And so this gentleman's whole life had been filled with those determinants of health that ultimately took his life. But he lived for 2 years, and that 2 years became his saving grace. He was able to apologize to family members. He was able to reunite with them and embrace them. So not just being a peer, but a community health worker. The two roles are definitely different, but similar because of the support each gives. And that's all.
Thank you, Ronni. Thank you for sharing your story. Very, very personal. And thank you for sharing, the many success stories that you have seen, through the work that you do. We really appreciate you sharing your story, being part of the Greater Columbia board. You bring a great input. Very happy to have you here today. Any questions for overall? So next, we have our next learning collaborative is going to be Thursday, June 30th from 1 to 3 p.m. The topic is going to be medication management. And here in just a few minutes, I'm going to put in a link into the chat. I'll actually do it right now before I forget. Into the chat, so that way you guys are able to provide some feedback on this learning collaborative, and then also give us any input as far as to where we can improve. Any questions? I know, Melissa, you had a question for us. What's your question?
Oh, I wanted to say thank you to Ronni. That was very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing and everything you do. Well, I had a few questions. One, I mean, this term CHW, community health worker, is kind of new to me. It seems like it's not new to other people, so I must have just missed it. So I'm kind of like, what kind of training or certification? And I know she kind of commented they're similar but different. So is there a quick way to kind of say how people decide to be one or the other?
Well, actually, they complement each other. So the CHW role has been around for eons. In other countries, CHW has been always the liaison to community health. And so when people are in third world countries, you might have a CHW that comes out to make sure that they're getting the help that they need in their community. So basically, that CHW is helping with health determinants, or determinants of health. So if you're diabetic, or you have high blood pressure, or you're trained in all of those modules, and you're given an overview of mental health, but you're not given a deep dive into what would be peer support, how peers work versus how the community health worker works. So the community health worker, in a nutshell, is someone that cares for people that have health conditions or imminent need.
So they're kind of like a case manager on the medical health side of things often, it sounds like. Okay.
Almost, yeah.
Okay, a couple of my questions were, Martine, when you started and you kind of went through your PowerPoint, you were talking about that the behavioral health and that peer supports have to be working under a behavioral health entity agency, and the billing, it sounds like, goes to like the MCOs and stuff. So you're saying in order to bill for peer support, you have to be under a behavioral health agency, but there are people doing peer support in other kind of like the new recovery community organizations and stuff like that aren't billing. They maybe just get grants and they hire peer supports, and they just kind of can, do they still have to follow the same kind of guidelines as us, as far as our peer supports have to like get the CPC training, and they have to get the counselor affiliate, agency affiliate, and there's like certain trainings they have to do? Is that?
Yeah, that would still apply. And
they're just popping up all over and not necessarily under any entity. So I just am getting a little bit confused about, is it just because these are just like their own nonprofit, like nonprofit youth center, and so they just hire peers and they call them peer specialists? So
So I can answer some of that for you, Melissa. I'm sorry that you're having challenges around that. So the healthcare authority is over the peers. The DOH is over the CHWs. So the peer role that you're seeing out in the community, they're really pushing for peer driven organizations to open up. And the reason for that is because when you have drop-in centers, or you have what they call clubhouses, that's where peer-to-peer meets. But no, they can't. Can't.
Sorry.
Because they're not an agency and they're an organization. Because they're not providing professional mental health services. Okay.
I mean, I'm familiar with, I'm a licensed mental health counselor and a substance use disorder professional. And so I've worked in both, and I do co-occurring. So I'm familiar kind of with the agency stuff, but now, and too, with clubhouses and recovery community organizations, I think they're great ideas. I'm 100% into the peer thing. For sure. I'm a person of recovery myself. So I just am like, there are different rules then, right? Like we have certain rules we have to follow because we're under the MCOs and the DOH and all of that stuff, and other entities can just sort of have a little bit more room. Is that?
Right. So the healthcare authority right now it has grant applications for peer-run organizations, and that's basically how they're getting their support. And of course, donations, and then they have teaching and stuff like that they do online trainings for different things.
So in those peer-run organizations, are they also held to needing to get a counselor affiliate, needing to become a certified peer counselor, and having supervision by an MHP or an SUDP?
Okay, so the difference is no, they don't have to have peer supervision. They do not have to have an agency affiliated. These organizations, they do have to have their certified peer, but they're not therapeutic. And that's what's behind it, is because they would be a coach instead of a peer. So they would come out with a different
like a recovery coach.
Right. And so they don't have to align with those kind of rules. But if you're working with an agency, I have to carry my agency affiliated. I also have to have my trainings. I also have to have my my certified peer counselor certification.
They don't bill MCOs and stuff.
No.
What they do is their grant money just pays for whatever services. Okay.
Correct.
So it's the billing. And so that was the other question. And I've heard different things about this, and I'm very curious. So there was something in there that talked about that peer support could do individual and group. Where did I write that out? Provide individual and group support in a various settings, such as behavioral health agencies, SUD treatment programs, hospitals, crisis settings. So I'm more focused on the behavioral health SUD agencies, but my understanding is, because we do peer stuff, but my understanding is our peers cannot provide. So like, for example, Seeking Safety is a co-occurring SUD trauma evidence-based practice that anyone can go to the training and anyone can do it, can get trained and provide kind of those skills, those life skills. But my understanding is we can't bill for it if it's not a certified SUDP or mental health person. So really peers can't, as far as the behavioral health agencies, peers really can't do groups because we
No,
really
they
can't bill
can.
for it.
That's not correct.
They can do groups?
Yes, they can do groups. We do groups with WISE too. So at Lutheran, we did a creative care, which was parent focused, and it was doing art during that time, but it was also talking about some of the challenges and trying to get parents to meet parents so that they could build their natural support alliances. So
And the
how
peer,
we how you build that is that it would be the group would be billing for each parent that attended, and it would be under that group modality.
so, okay, so you could have a peer-led group. So let's say we had a peer and they were going to teach some life skills
Mm-hmm.
using some evidence-based curriculum like seeking safety.
Mm-hmm.
We could bill for the peer support, having that life skills group every week with, like, 5 peers or whatever.
Yeah, as long as they're in your program, the people attending are in your program.
Okay. So they have to be in treatment, or I'm also doing the Recovery Navigator program. Have you heard of that yet?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so we're trying to do that. Okay, so, okay, well, that's new information. Thank you, because what I've heard before is that the reason that peers can do groups, but you can't bill for it. So then obviously a lot of people aren't going to do it if.
Yeah, well, you can, and
Okay.
it's done. Lutheran has done that for many, many years.
Okay.
Working with the parents, working with the youth peers. They do groups with the youth. It's a collaborative during that time, and the hope is that participation gives them abilities. So whether that's maybe some gaps within their learning, or that I've seen peers do music groups for that involvement. I've seen peers do emotional groups where they teach what is it called?
DBT.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So any of those things that would assist that family in more healthy learning and working to their goals, as long as it's following that golden thread of documentation, that there was a need behind their participation.
Okay, I think that was mostly, sorry to take up all the question time. I think that was mostly my questions.
No worries, Melissa. We are at time, but if anybody has any other questions, here is our contact information for myself, Sam, and Diane. Feel free to shoot us an email. We can connect you with any of the presenters today, any of the attendees as well. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys in June.